Hello and welcome to another episode of the Space Brothers Gushcast. I'm actually not sure what episode number we're on at this
I
point.
believe it's
The
7.
labeling is
Well,
it? I trust you if you
I
say
think
it's
it's
7.
7 in the episodes. I forget if you made, the preliminary, the one where we reintroduced and didn't talk about episodes, just talked about doing the podcast. I don't know if you call that episode 0 or 1 or not. Maybe we'll have to check the number. But
I'd have to go back and check.
it feels like 7. Feels like a good number.
Okay, cool. It feels like 7 to me too then. We had to take a couple of weeks off because we had some personal stuff going on. I personally had to take a weekend off to attend Wrestle Dream in Tacoma, which, by the way, was an awesome event. Had a great time with my polycule that weekend.
Sounds good. Wrestling. I did get my hair done, so that took a lot of time.
I can imagine, but I'm sure that you are dashing at this point.
I have no idea.
Just so everybody is aware as well, we're just some preliminary housekeeping. CT and I have been talking, and we are thinking of doing some more tier lists, some countdowns. If you have any ideas out there and you would like to shoot them over to us, feel free to hit us up on social media. I'm available on Blue Sky and Mastodon. So feel free to hit me up. I'm Otaku Review on both platforms.
Well, Mastodon, you got to give the server address as well. So I'm fellas out there, but on the site urusai.social. So are you?
That's me as well. That's me, but Otaku Review. But yeah, we are thinking we'd like to do some tier lists. We'd like to do some more countdowns. We kind of miss doing them. And with the winter coming up, it's the perfect opportunity to get back into the swing of things. So yeah, if you have any ideas for countdowns or tier lists, feel free to shoot them over to us. We'd love to hear them.
But what are we doing today?
But getting in... but yeah, did you have anything you wanted to add on to that?
Nope. Not this time.
All right. In that case, we can go ahead. We can dispense with the preliminaries and just get right into the episode. We are discussing episodes 39 through 45 or 46? 45. 39 through 45. These are the Hibito episodes. These are the episodes that drove me freaking bonkers when I was watching this week to week.
Now, I was definitely weekly by this point. I forget when I started in and caught up. I don't know if Crunchyroll's history goes back 100%. I could probably figure that out. Although I'm not sure that they show the date that you started watching anyway, so maybe not. Maybe it's no good. But I definitely was watching weekly, and this is a hell of an arc to stop at the end of episodes with certain actions, which we will dig into, and they go, oh my god, and you have to just chew on your nails. Now, did you chat about it with others, or did you just kind of stew and your leg was shaking for a week, waiting for the next episode to drop?
Well, I had a little bit of both because I was discussing the show on JTOR AM at the time, and I remember very clearly how frustrated I was every week that there was just cliffhanger after cliffhanger throughout this entire
after worse cliffhanger. Definitely an escalation of cliffhangers. Oh boy.
So we'll get into the details here in just a few minutes, but I want to go ahead and just ask you straight up. When you were first watching this way back in the day, and how worried were you that we were actually going to see a major character like injury or even death at this point?
Injury I could potentially see. I couldn't. I mean, the title is Space Brothers. Obviously, there's a level of I can't believe the author would set up, and get this many chapters in and then kill one of the brothers. We've we already have a
Yeah,
known
yeah.
death to a set of space brothers who play a major part in this arc, but I couldn't imagine that. I thought it was possible that Damian could. Even then, it doesn't feel like the kind of show that would have soured the mission with a death. So it felt more like a okay, here's very dramatic events. There will be consequences from it. So it doesn't feel like you're getting cheated. But in some ways, I felt like I was just fighting the pace of the revelations. I'm like, how are they possibly going to get out of this? Which, to be fair, is a hallmark of a well-written arc. But it because I couldn't believe that we would lose Hibito or even Damian, but boy howdy, it sure felt like it.
Yeah, I mean, I knew Hibito probably wasn't going to die. Damien, I wasn't so sure about. I would have been willing to put money on one of them, on Damien possibly dying, but I'm glad that it worked out in the end, and we can start getting
You
into more
ruined it.
details now so that people
Well,
can
I
understand.
guess we are going and spoiling all of these, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I
But all
don't.
right, episode
I didn't think
39.
because this was very early in there. Like we weren't 10 episodes into them being on the moon, so it didn't feel like the first major EVA that wasn't throwing regolith on the base was going to amount to
Uh-huh.
one of the astronauts dying because that would have changed everything else at that point. It does in the end anyway, but I think it would have been a pall that seemed unlikely for the kind of series this is. Before we lean in, though, or I guess to tie in with some of the beginnings of episode 39, Lunar Illusions, we start with a little bit of going around, and I believe a bit of recall with Buddy seeing stuff on the moon, don't we? Or am I misremembering the beginning? It does come up a bit between Buddy
Mm-hmm.
and what is it? But I guess that's only when we get to the base. So there's that side question. I've asked it once before, but because it came up here again, did you have any back of the uh, 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 back of the mind thought as to whether or not they were going to introduce aliens at last to the series? Since
I didn't think that they were going to introduce aliens. I figured they were going to introduce something meaningful. Because it was coming off as a very obvious little Chekhov's gun kind of thing.
Schrodinger's
Um,
light gleam,
yeah,
Schrodinger's
pretty
light gleam in
much.
the distance. You'd best reveal what that is in the third act.
Yeah, so I figured that they were going to introduce something meaningful with that. I didn't think it was going to
Okay.
be aliens, though.
Yes, I suppose not, but it's still kind of funny because I still feel like the presentation of the very beginning of it was distinct enough and not explainable enough to two kids. Of course, they were kids and they're imaginative. Imaginative? Uh, but the whole reveal of like the thing that the UFO they see in the sky and it zooms off to the moon and stuff like that. I wonder if that will ever have an explanation. It doesn't need it, but it still sticks something in the back of my brain that's like, does this mean something beyond the just the hard science of it all, and we'll get something out of it simply because it feels more real to more than one characters who are not prone to flights of fancy, since they're doing you know actual naturalism out there. But I suppose as we go on, we'll find out. Maybe last chapter is when the alien invasion happens. So,
in other Best Boy Murasaki returns. Welcome back, Murasaki. We missed you.
But we start out with a little bit of the gang getting together outside, and of course I enjoyed Muta's head getting covered with cherry blossom petals. I really enjoy the new opening as of this one, which we'll chat about at the end.
We are finally at my favorite OP.
That's fine. It's my second favorite.
This is my favorite OP.
That's
this
the one that I hoped you had as your favorite. It is my second favorite. We can gush over that at the end, unless you want to do it now. But
we can do it later at the end when we talk about all the music and extras and such.
Sarika, of course, reveals herself to be sorely in need of JAXA Sakura petal catching training.
I love seeing her in the background of that news clip, just shooting out for the cherry blossoms.
Indeed. And it's interesting, before we get to, Nasuda and Murasaki doing their stuff, we get an all-hands meeting of new employees of JAXA. And how many were revealed? I forget.
I think they said it was like 30 or 50, somewhere in that range.
Excuse me, only 5 astronaut candidates, but 34 new employees. So 30 support staff, effectively. And of course, the other scene starts talking about that specifically. So since you love Best Boy Nasuda, what are we getting out of Nasuda and then Murasaki? The famous Nasuda.
Yes. Excuse me. I love his little story about the kanji for person being a support system. And then I love Murasaki coming in and erasing it.
It's so crestfallen.
Just eliminating the story altogether.
It was pretty funny how angry he got at it, because it's supposed to represent two people supporting each other. But Nasuda is like, look at this. Aren't you angry? That one's holding all the weight. And of course, that is representing all of JAXA, who is shooting the astronauts specifically into space. The top end of the Kana, which looks like it's going into orbit. So Nasuda kind of steals every scene Nasuda interacts with.
Yeah, we'll talk about my favorite Nasuda moment later on in the last episode that we discussed.
Gotcha. I like that he drew an arrow for, launching all of you into space. And then I got one of those he said the thing moments because, of course, he writes the kanji for space. I'm like, hey, I recognize those. Those are on the title of the thing we're watching. Shows up in every OP. That's space. Space. Gotta meme it.
Oh, stretch. Oh. But yeah,
Murasaki, it's a great.
The only other thing I can really think of from this episode before we talk about Hibito and Damien getting into some trouble is I like the little talk show segment with
And
Buddy
Aaron and the
feeling the need to flex on the entire world again.
That's true. We've gotten that before.
Yeah, but that seems to be his personality. He is in love with those biceps.
Well, who wouldn't be, to be fair? Those are.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Those are some
biceps.
mighty pythons. Yeah.
Yes, I also enjoyed, where Karen is talking about the silkworm growing and what you can do with it, and that it's they don't take much to grow. They're an excellent source of protein, and then at the end is like, of course, I still can't eat them. So, but the Buddy is chowing down. So you gotta have quality protein to to support them muscles, especially on the moon where you gotta keep doing exercise constantly to keep up your muscle mass. Otherwise, it would deteriorate. They're not in the orbit. But yeah, even on the moon, you have to do a lot of exercise to keep it up because at 1/6, you'd lose a lot of mass otherwise. I don't think they ever reveal that much about their overall, because it's a permanent moon, and we haven't really gotten that. So I don't think they've revealed a lot about the support system for it. Oxygen cleaning and water generation and other stuff. Because obviously you can fit all of that in a mission with a particular parameter. You take enough with you to go there, come back, support you for a particular time period. But I guess it comes down, if the ISS can support people for extended lengths and there aren't too many people going to and from, they just get supply drops periodically. So unmanned supply drops is, I guess, easy enough. So
So, do we want to talk about Hibito and Damien now?
I feel like when they take off, they're like, we suddenly lost signal from Gibson. They do mention it happened near the area where you described seeing a flash. So we get a little bit of ominous stuff going on that gets to play in and out here.
Excuse me. I can't help but feel like they fake out the audience. It's almost annoying because they fake us out once. And then it's like, okay, they're fine now. We had our little fake out, whatever. And then they do it again for real.
Yeah, that wasn't very fake, that last seconds of the episode. But
just that lasting image of the buggy floating in air over this massive, massive hole.
I guess that the setup, part of it that kind of annoys me is I feel like they, for a place with permanent or ostensibly permanent moon base mission aspirations, I feel like they don't have enough satellites having flown overhead, constant communication, a lot of detail, because they just say it's over here. Maybe some of it is, of course, provided to them, and we don't need to know just how far out it is and other stuff. But you're seeing part of the extended moon buggy trips that I don't think any moon mission prior really had as part of it. It's like, let's just go take this thing and go to town on it. I feel like they would have had an awful lot of mapping already done to the point where they know
Yeah,
what gaps are and
that
good
did strike me as
mapping, because this
weird.
seems like they were going out fully blind. They weren't following the Gibson's path, which would have made sense, is follow the tracks the Gibson laid out, which would have meant they're not
Hmm.
trucking. They are trucking very fast. They're talking about, everything can play tricks on you. You can't even tell. And then, yes, the fake out there. They're literally 6 feet from toppling over the edge into an unknown, small crescent shaped crater. But then they're right back to being lazy again later too. They throw them over the edge, but it's like, wait, why are you guys going so fast? You don't need to book. Uh, I was curious if the manga presented them not going quite so fast, and indeed, you can't really get a grasp of motion as easily from the manga, but there is a decent cloud getting kicked up behind them, so it does kind of imply that they're doing. And if you get a skid pattern, if you can hit the brakes and skid out for 4 or 5 points, your moon
Hmm.
buggy thing, to prevent having gone off the side into a weird loop. They're going way too fast.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
almost are like, oh wow, that could have been really bad. All right, truck it. We're riding along the edge of this thing and the edge of another side. They're like going on top of what seems like a bridge almost. It's large, but it looks like they're just trucking along at speed somewhere where it just seems real freaking dangerous to do it. And of course, it is.
Hmm.
So
And then they take their eyes off of
right,
where they're going to fiddle with a
yeah. Well,
box.
yes, exactly. It's like read the thing. Well, read it when you get there, man. You're booking. Although one of the other funny things about this is, they're excited to start their astronaut training back on Earth, Mutha and the gang, and they
Mm.
interrupt this stuff where we've just been freaked out by them possibly pitching themselves off the edge of a cliff, and then we're just in a extraordinarily boring session. And apparently, they've been through 2 weeks of this crap, and I'm like, what is this guy doing?
Oh
What are they
God, I would
reading?
have died in that.
It's like panic flashbacks from your worst days ever at school, any lecture that's that bad. I'm like, oh man. I have not felt that feeling in a long time. And
Yeah, I cannot handle lectures like that where it's just a dude mumbling a long string of words, no visuals to help you out, nothing to keep you engaged except for your own willpower and drive.
possibly my trick is getting an Altoid and sticking it between my gum and lip, and it creates enough of a strong interaction that it keeps me from falling asleep. So that's that's some pro tip for you guys out there. You get, if you start undergoing training and have to wake up during During extremely boring lessons. There you go. I'm curious what. It didn't seem like in the manga it was reflecting very much time. And most of the time he was mumbling, but you still got at least a page of moving on to Article 4. Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency's goals are to foster research at universities and other institutions, as well as the level of space science, in an integrated manner. Like, what are you trying to convey? Uh, isn't this the kind of thing you just tell the kids to read on their own? So
Yeah, but even if you wanted to be an astronaut more than anything, how many people are just going to say that they read everything, and how many people are actually going to sit down and line by line read the terms and conditions of being an astronaut?
but they've been through 2 weeks of this weird stuff. The
Yeah.
road to
So
space is truly difficult. But then we go right back up to
but
the moon.
yeah,
And yeah, they're
but yeah, and then heading back out to the moon. Did we have anything else on 39 that you wanted to
no,
hit on?
no.
I think we've hit
It's
on
just
pretty
it's
much the
just the
whole episode.
surprising way that they're climbing around because
Mm-hmm.
it's stupid.
Yeah. So, all right, let's start getting into Hibito and Damien's big adventure.
Not Pee Wee. Yes. So the next episode, Heaven and Hell.
So, it's amazing how a situation can escalate from bad to worse to worst.
It is pretty bad. It is definitely pretty bad.
Yeah, it is amazing. There are so many things that happen within this arc that I didn't even consider until it actually
Right,
happened.
until
And then I was like, oh,
I was expecting EVA, problem out there to make some excitement. I was not expecting them being pitched off a cliff like that. I was expecting maybe, they hit something and are forced to slide down uncontrollably and can't get out with the buggy, but that looked like a crazy, crazy dive. And of course, it is represented as that, and they do convey that since it's 1/6 the gravity, of course the all of the stuff together won't be as serious, even falling out and rolling around. Especially if there's a lot of regolith piled up, because it's a bit more like skiing than it is falling down a rocky slope. You don't have as much mass, but it does seem hard
yeah, but
to.
man, I was shocked as
Mhm.
all hell that the spacesuits were even durable enough to withstand that fall that they took.
And I'm sure liberties were taken, but I'm curious now if they've ever
Yeah,
stress
I would have
tested
to assume
these
so.
kinds of things to that degree. Have they ever taken a suit on an EVA and pitched it off a thing on the moon to see how rugged they actually are? If an astronaut were to tumble down a slope, because that would let them know what areas to
Mm,
avoid or not. And I suppose for the most part, they avoid any potentially hazardous areas. There's not much reason for them to go out and do all of the things they're doing here. But especially when you think about it and when you think about later events, it's like, why would they send two astronauts out on an EVA as opposed to just sending one of the other unmanned probes with a camera to follow the tracks and get to the point of, oh, okay, the tracks lead here. It looks like this thing slid downhill and didn't know how to get up. If we want to recover it, we'll have to send a mission over here and see what happens, where to go, and they could all take it. And in the meanwhile, they would in fact have a second set of tracks and a direct path that would be like, okay, we we can't go diving off a cliff here because literally two physical things have already gotten down this path. So we're taking a bit of liberties to introduce this kind of danger, and probably taking even more liberties in the prospect that they couldn't have survived that at all. But it would be interesting to know what kind of stress testing they've done to those suits.
Yeah, I would love to know just how durable a spacesuit is to be able to survive that fall. But like we were talking about, this episode, things go from bad to even worse because not only do they have to survive that fall, not only do both of them have damaged parts of their suit. Damien's, the temperature regulator is buggered, and Hibito is running low on air.
Well, not yet, obviously. That happens as a result of the second fall. But
yeah, he damaged it. I thought he damaged his main tank in the first fall, and then the secondary tank.
No. The main, he has 10 hours of oxygen. So does Damien.
Okay.
So they're not as worried. The reason that Hibito is like, okay, we have to move, and I have to move him, and we can't wait, is because of Damien's temperature regulation. So Hibito knows that if they wait for, it'll take 2.5 hours for everyone from the Boone base to get there with help and potentially be able to recover them and pull them up, but Damien will die in that time. So Hibito's thought is that they have to get, at the very least, up to the surface and sunlight so that there's a way to regulate his temperature properly, because Damien will die. And of course, that's why Damien, when he's found, Damien fires off his flare. Hibito is able to find the buggy they were on, and Damien finds out about all of the conditions. And Damien, they flash back to training and what you should do, why people EVA in pairs, and what you should do, and whose lives to prioritize. And Damien says, I obviously can't make it, so you have to leave me and prioritize yourself. And what is it? I don't suppose you thought for a second
but then
that
Hibito is all mighty Hibito, and like, no, I can save you.
I don't suppose you thought for a second
and
Hibito was actually going
mode.
to walk off, though. Like, because it's conveyed as if he's leaving Damien behind. He's just going to the buggy to get more information and on their equipment and their situation and evacuation. Of course, Hibito has found Gibson, who's right above them, and knows that can be used as a resource with the buggy's battery. So he's got more information, but they try to do a fake out like Hibito is, okay, sorry, guy, I got to leave you. And they flash back to Damien's kid, which of course has multiple harsh readings. When you pull the family into it, that's, your very common death flag. Is you got a picture of the wife and kid in your pocket? Well, you're not coming back. So we have that in the back of our minds. But yes, it did not seem likely at that point. He had plenty of oxygen, and there were options. So Hibito could bring him up, and that's what he tries to do. He's like, "You're just a sack of potatoes, man. I can carry you." And even Damien, responds to the fact that there is the Gibson above, so it's not like they have to climb out of a crater themselves. There's something that they can do, and there's a path that a machine can take. So therefore, they at least feel okay. But yes, Hibito went. That's another thing that sort of feels weird when Damien fires his flare and Hibito can see down. That's a heck of a long distance down, and it feels like he's just barreling down very fast and recklessly yet again. I'm like, you guys just pitched yourself off a cliff. Why are you jumping down this far? But to be fair, that was the only time he'd have any what is it, visibility. He knows Damien is down there. He's only got a limited amount of
Mm-hmm.
time with the flare in the sky and full vision, so he's going scraping and bouncing, scraping and bouncing. I think the anime more than the manga continues to show the tears in Hibito's the back of his suit, foreshadowing
Mm-hmm.
the main tank blowout that he will shortly experience. But yeah, once he starts,
So,
sorry, uh,
no, it's fine. But speaking of the flashbacks, I want to
yeah,
jump back to this. I know we've seen a little bit of Brian J at this point, but at this point, with him quote unquote mentoring Hibito in his own way, what did you think of Brian J at this point? Was he, because I know we're going to talk about him a ton when we get to the prequel movie,
and
but at this point, how are you feeling about Brian J?
I mean, it's interesting because obviously this is, I'm not sure how many years, it's maybe 6 years prior. It's revealed that, Hibito is back up for Brian on whatever mission he's about to go up on and not return from. Hibito is in a mode that we have not seen him in before. Even in the midst of this terrifying event, he manages to calm himself down quickly. He's keeping his head about him. He's acting the superhero. But once we get the flashback, he's like, I'm screwing up. and we're seeing him in sort of the beginning of real mission training and not at all being in uh, uh, the excited and competent headspace that we know him from. And in the meanwhile, you have veteran Brian J, who's, you know, he is knocking him around a little, but it does feel paternalistic. And he does, of course, say, I've logged way more simulator deaths than you have. So it's, even though he kind of feels like a bit of a brash jerk, you more see it seems more like, that's just what, being a part of the program for as long as he has does. And of course, it's their job to convey that and train everyone behind them to be able to take their place eventually. Hopefully not because, their parachutes get tangled up and they die unnecessarily, but we haven't yet had the longer session, which I think is a lot better. But we get the beginnings of it, where Hibito is himself very surly, and Brian just seemed very very cocky. I'll have more to chat when we get to the major the extended session between Hibito and Brian, but that's that's further along. Right now, we basically just get the two shorter scenes, one in the trainer, and then the other one where they were talking about, when
Mhm.
to abandon your buddy.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So, all right. Um, so we're at the point now. Hibito is climbing up the cliff. He falls. He damages his air tank and is left flying even more SOL.
Yeah, that I feel like was, we're already in dire straits. We have a long way to go to fix him, but and of course Hibito climbing up makes you go, oh, jeez. Uh, but then when he falls down, slams in, it almost looks like he explodes, which is, just
Almost. And he talks about what was that shockwave? And I don't know, my brain would automatically be racing to be coming up with what was that, what was that,
right.
what was that to figure it out.
Uh,
Because I would already be panicking at this
so yeah,
point. So
the end of Heaven and Hell here. We don't really talk about the episode titles as much. I think they're often interesting in that they either represent a a tone of something they're going to present at the very beginning, or you don't know what it means until the very end. Or at least you don't know how much it means at the very end. When we get to 3 astronauts, you're like, well, there's a bunch of astronauts, but you don't know what it means until that's conveyed. But it was interesting to have a bit between, Hibito and Brian, talking about the afterlife. Do you believe in anything? And Hibito doesn't. And the title is like, heaven and hell is something you can only experience while you're alive. And then it gets conveyed. We're in the middle of a crazy, dangerous situation, but it's also the most beautiful sight I've ever seen because of the pitch blackness of the crater and the ability to see the depths of space at that point. No atmosphere, no light, no anything. And it's just like, it's the kind of sight that he's dreamed his whole life to see, but he's only seen it because they are in the most dangerous situation they've ever been. So he's right about literally both of those. But yeah, when it ends, we just get the we don't get any of the information from it. So that's the ending of that episode is like, okay, we've seen Hibito come crashing down, and we've seen an ejection of we assume oxygen from his backpack in a giant cloud. Damien's expression is horrified. We have no idea what just happened to Hibito, and wait another week. I think this was probably the worst one to wait through. Because I was already like, how did they manage to survive, and how are they going to get out? And now I'm like, gee, Damien's going to freeze to death, and Hibito's going to, well, if he's not already dead, which was a certain possibility there, it's like, how can they possibly get themselves out of here? We still know that help won't come.
Yeah, this was, to this day, I will say that this story arc gave me the most intense heart palpitations that I've ever experienced when watching a series weekly.
Completely understandable and definitely shared. Was this the peak of palpitating for you, or was it at the very end before Brian's final reveal where he's literally where you literally think you're about to see a character suffocate to death?
It was at the end. That was peak. Oh my god, are they actually going to do
Thankfully,
this?
we got the resolution there. I don't think I could have survived if he was mid everything, fade to black, See you next week. No. But yeah, this one was full on panic mode, just trying to imagine how on earth they'd get out of it. And there's a lot of that lately in the manga, so you'll get to experience that when we get there. If it's not resolved by the time we do, which seems unlikely, it's going to take us a while. Then we'll have yet another mode. Hooray!
Oh, I am certain that we're going to be having multiple of these moments once we start getting into the manga and I read stuff that I have not experienced
I'll
yet.
I'll try to pick. Well, do you want me to pick stopping points where between episodes it's like, okay, stop here and don't read ahead for a while until we get closer to the next podcast? Because obviously you can just keep reading, you know, as far as you want, even if we're not doing
Yeah,
it.
I would say let's pick stopping
Well,
points.
yes, but I mean, do you want me to pick some specifically for tension heightening, like this? Because
Um, I trust your judgment. I trust that you'll find the proper ones that will balance between torture and
stress and release. Yes. Okay.
yes,
Sounds good.
exactly.
I obviously have to spend some time trying to map out going ahead, and I guess we'll chat about what kind of a pace we want to maintain because you can read a lot faster than you can watch. So if we're only reading at that point, we don't have to limit ourselves to sort of the anime pacing of it. But we'll have that conversation
Hmm.
in another 6 months or so, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, about that.
um. So yeah, Ibito possibly dead, but I think one of the interesting things about the beginning of, well, 80 Minutes to Live, which obviously reveals something pretty quickly if you've read the episode title, uh,
Uh huh.
is I, I think this time more than any other time, they're doing the normal. They begin the episode with repeat scenes from the last one, but this one doesn't repeat the footage, or at least not as much of the footage, because we get the frame of reference instead of only Hibito. We get more from Damien himself, uh, witnessing what happens to Hibito from his perspective. And I'm like thinking about, okay, I'm a dude. I've probably broken a few bones. Uh, I'm freezing and probably have less than an hour to live myself. Uh, I'm thermally blanketed like a cocoon, at the bottom of a cliff, 100% helpless. Just have a little bit of light, a tiny bit of light, and the only thing you're doing is you're waiting to start being pulled up, and instead you see your buddy come out of nowhere, falling down, slam on the ground, and effectively explode. And just thinking about that, it's like the freakiest kind of thing you can imagine. Hibito comes crashing down out of nowhere, no warning, no sound. And I do love that during
Hmm.
a lot of this stuff, they specifically do not use sound. Uh, and I think that heightens the terror. And then Hibito's not moving for a
Oh, I
while,
totally
and it's like,
agree.
oh god, did I just what now? Thankfully, he does soon start to move, but then you get the your main tank has blown. You don't have 9.5 hours of oxygen now. You have only your secondary tank, so 80 minutes of oxygen left. So it's interesting that it hasn't changed anything though, because the reason Hibito wanted them on the move was to save to get Damien to sunlight, so
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't freeze due to the temperature regulation blown. And there's a reason for it, but both of them have enough oxygen, so if he can get him out of there. Now this changes the calculus, but in the end it doesn't. Because Hibito's now like, well, I don't have enough oxygen. We can't wait here anymore. Even if I could heat you up, we can't wait for them anyway. I'm gonna die if we just sit here. So now it's like, okay, we have to go even more. Although in the middle of it, he basically knows that that's going to doom him even more. Even if they could get there, even if they could just huck an oxygen tank down the cliff. However, whatever they have, they probably have some kind of gear. But even if they could do that, Damien would die over there. But with all likelihood, he would die if he stays. But knows that he'll really die if they move.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's all they can do now.
But
Is like, well, I can still save this other guy. So, so let's go.
So at this point, NASA and JAXA are working on their rescue mission, and they're talking worst case scenarios, which amps up the drama and tension even more because they're discussing things that either have happened or possibly could happen that we haven't seen yet. And it's like, wow, that you're giving me even more things to imagine terrible happening in the near future that I didn't even consider. Thanks.
Right.
So,
They're talking about. I enjoy, of course, uh, the NASA stuff. Kind of almost immediately goes into Apollo 13 mode, which is okay. Here's what's
uh-huh.
going on. What are all of the things that could be going on? What do we need to do? They still at least had full communication, so they could act more specifically for specific targets, whereas they're now communication blind, so they all have to guess and run probabilities. Uh, it so it you get sort of the stress down on the surface even while they're moving into action. Once Muda is pulled in, you get his level of it from a sense of helplessness as well, because JAXA can't really do much. They have a satellite to provide data for them, which will help, but it'll take time to compile and send over. So we're getting the other part of it, which is hurry up and wait. So we know what's going on with
Hmm.
Hibito and Damien, but the astronauts on the moon, they can't move yet. They have to prepare the rescue vehicle, and that's going to take an hour. And then they know it's going to take an hour to get there, or more than that. But they can't do anything more than it. The only thing they can do is choose who's going, and it ends up being Freddy and
It
Buddy.
does. It did kind of surprise me when they got into the buggy and were like, "Okay, we can leave in an hour and a
Right.
half." And it's like really?
That that
That did kind of surprise me.
uh, I agree. Now, what I was hoping was that maybe what I feel like there was a scene left out here because the buggy is basically not charged enough. That seems to be what they show, is that the buggy, takes half an hour to get enough charge to get to where they are, but of course they need way more than that because they have to get back. They have to be able to perform rescue operations, so they need a much larger buffer of battery time. Uh, but for the most part, any vehicle that once it's not in use, they would be preparing it for the next time. So I feel like it would have been getting charged a while ago. So I would have liked to see something where the buggy was, just back before they go out in the smaller buggy. The larger one is just back from a particular mission, so it's been drained from active use, and they have started charging it already. But
Hmm.
and that's why they can't ride it, the whole time. I would have
Okay.
liked to see that because I can't imagine that they wouldn't have kept it at optimal charge the whole time, especially because you might have to use things in an emergency
Yeah,
just
yeah. So that part like kind of surprised and confused me. But but yeah, that explanation makes
or that it
sense.
was or that there's other stuff going on, but they're largely talking about batteries and charging. uh, I'm perfectly willing to assume that certain equipment, you need them for specific things, and it takes a while for them to start up and get ready because you're not in a hurry to do anything most of the time. You have a mission, and it's like, okay, 2 hours before we start out, let's start prepping the vehicle that we need for it. That's fine by me. But when it's largely implied that it would be ready to go, except they need more battery charge, it makes me wonder why it wasn't charged already. So I would like to
Mhm.
see it, but it's not a terribly big deal. It's just for it's one of those things like we've talked about before because of how much of a near current day hard sci-fi series it is. I really like when those are able to cover all of the things that you can think about it. You're not necessarily looking for plot holes, but you're still going to notice things that are like, wait, does this make sense? And it's always nice when
Mhm.
those things that you would otherwise be thinking about have some kind of coverage. So,
So here's the other thing about this episode that really bothered me. They bring Muta in, inform him of what's going on, ask him for his input because he knows his brother better than anyone else in the world, and then NASA disregards 100%.
it's interesting in the manga. He's shut down harder because they just said when Mutis gives the suggestion, uh, there's only a couple panels and it's just conveyed. Hoshika just said, NASA says no. Whereas in the anime, there's explanations given. Uh, I don't I don't agree with that specifically because the things that Muta doesn't know is their training and their command structure and their other things. They are communications blind, which is very true, but
Mm-hmm.
NASA knows how all of the astronauts have been trained in the positions. They can't know that both of them were in a position. For all they know, they just, slid down a slope and are waiting for recovery. They just don't have
Yeah.
communication, but are perfectly fine. Yes, they should be preparing for every possibility. So I do think that they should be leaning into that a bit more. And I think that's part of the I want to say victimization, but that's part of the author taking certain liberties to create a very dramatic scene that wouldn't otherwise happen. It's in service of drama, whereas I think they would indeed be considering that more because they would be running what if one of them is damaged to the point that can't they can't wait 2.5 hours for rescue. They don't have enough oxygen or
Uh-huh.
something else. That means they have to try to get out on their own. There's only one path out on their own, which would be over this way. I still don't think the timing works out too well because they they say that's 20 kilometers. and I'm trying to run the math of Hibito and Gibson getting out and the amount of minutes that they're talking about. It doesn't feel like he
Uh-huh.
had enough time to jog behind a robocar all 20 kilometers, but I'm not that concerned with running the actual numbers and seeing if he had to make Olympic running time. Now, maybe he's just that good. I don't know. He can leap very high in the air. But obviously, as with the other stuff we've been talking about, it's not taken into account at all because Ozma is taking it into account, and he'd already started with something that will help the situation out. I think NASA is correct in their
Hmm.
judgment. I just think they should also be factoring that in a way that's actively conversed about. What would Hibito or Damien be likely to do if the one or the other of them couldn't wait in that period of time? Obviously, if one or both of them are dead, well, they know they're not dead. A flare went off. So, but if one or the other of them couldn't wait, yes, they would move. So therefore, what should we do in this circumstance? And the end result that we get down to is the right one. I just feel like yes, that would have been part of the conversation. There's a second more annoying one in the next episode though, but we'll get there when we get there. So yes, they ask Muta about it, but it's just part of their calculus in this case. So I can
Hmm.
see why they wouldn't redirect things. But it does seem like that the calculus isn't really fully talked through because it would become okay. Maybe if they go to that other location, they're wasting time if Hibito and Damien are right where they fell down. But the main point is that's the that's the location if they can't wait. So it's the biggest concern area. So if you're sent there first, then at the very least you can rule out okay, the worst case scenario didn't happen. They're down there, they fire off a flare, Hibito or Damien fires off the other flare, and they're like, okay, we've communicated, we're fine. In this case, it just becomes they waste 20 more minutes to reposition themselves to go back to the original point, wherein they're down there with 8.5 more hours of oxygen and can be rescued, conveniently. But yeah, it's a situation where it's not fully thought through, and that's because of what he wants to
Hmm.
do with the whole situation. And it's like, okay, don't think about it too hard, but that's there for it is realism and consideration sacrificed for drama, and that's obvious. So, but it's good drama, so that becomes part of it.
It's very
If it's
good
really
drama,
good
yeah.
drama, are we fine with the fudge factors involved in getting there? And in the end, I'm usually a lot of these things bug me more, but in the end, I'm like, okay, I'll I'll forgive him. I know what you're doing, and it was a hell of a weekly episode ride, and it was a very good overall arc. So that's fine. But
So, we'll go ahead. We'll just keep
geez.
moving along because this arc just continues,
Mhm.
continues, continues. So yeah, so we're now to the point where Hibito only has a few minutes of oxygen
Yeah.
left.
While they're
He,
jogging out, just before we get there, we get an amusing. I forget if we've seen the Eddie and Jay space figures before.
I believe this is the episode where it starts with
with
them
with anything of
seeing
it.
those. figures in the store and deciding that they must
We,
have them.
well, yes, but I don't. So, for instance, I don't know if we saw it in the background of a scene which had Eddie in it before. We get a scene from Eddie in the ISS because, of course, we're now talking about astronaut peril, and the last one was when Brian and that crew died. So Eddie's checked in with. He's he's looking at an astronaut. You don't think much about it from a toy perspective, just thinking about the astronauts in this suit on the moon right now. And he's saying all we can do is pray. Back when it happened to Brian, there wasn't even time for that, which is a very somber message overall. But you get a little bit of foreshadowing from the toy, and I was curious if we'd ever seen it in the background of one of those shots of Eddie on the ISS previously, because he's been up there for all of the weeks that Muda's been through training so far. I don't know how long that dude's been on the ISS, but quite some time.
Apparently, yeah, because wasn't he was there? He's been there for at least as long as Muta has been
Yeah,
trying to be an
exactly, which is
astronaut, I
many
think.
months. So
Yeah.
I suppose it's possible he went up and down on multiple missions, but it feels like he's just, he's been habitating there. And there have been people who have had long tours on the ISS. I forget if more than a year or just almost a year or something like that. That could be looked up, but it's easy enough. So I'm curious if there was ever a shot of the doll before, though. That's all. But we get it here while Hibito is powering up the Gibson, and then they're tromping all the way back the way the Gibson came down. Hibito has to sacrifice his flare, so he can't even warn anyone that they're moving. And admittedly, this is one thing that bugged me a little. Admittedly, that's part of Jax's calculus. They're saying if they were on the moon, someone would have fired up the second flare to indicate that they're on the move, and they would be able to then triangulate or determine the course of action. It's like, okay, they're having to move, so let's reroute here. Hibito has to sacrifice his flare, but I feel like he doesn't do it quickly enough. It feels like he does it when he's got 20 minutes left, so it means they've been halfway on the move already. He has to use it to warm Damien up, which is good, and I like that sort of, okay, we're still in the middle of
that was a really
clever idea, well done. I'm like, okay, well presented, because we feel that Damien's right there on the edge, but he gets a little bit of a warm glow in his basically passed out mode. And it makes sense, because then it's part of the, okay, Hibito can't communicate where they're going, which would save his life, because he still has to do it to save Damien's life. I just think that what is it? I think that happens a little bit later. I feel like he would have been considering using the flare halfway or earlier on as part of the letting NASA know where they're going. So I think the warm up scene should have happened a little earlier, but again, that's not much of a complaint. But he goes through it. It's cool. He gives his friend a warm hug. And
it's the feeling of peeing your pants or something.
And then they
just warmth all over.
He's friggin' sprinting at that point. He's like, okay, I had to spend time doing this. We have to make our way out to the sun, so up the Gibson to like maximum speed. And I'm just sitting there going, oh god, Hibito's gonna trip on a thing, and then he's gonna get dragged behind the Gibson. It's like, this is so bad. They've already punished us enough. Are you going to have some other crazy thing before he gets to the surface? Thankfully, not. They get to the surface.
Yeah, I was waiting for like his harness to like
Mm-hmm.
snap or something.
Certainly, they've thrown everything against the wall so far, so I would not have been at all surprised. And indeed was waiting for that, and harness snapping will come about in the future sometime. Just not now. Um, see me, I'm ruining the whole series. Uh, I think it's very interesting. Even still, it's like okay, he's here. I can warm him up now, and even in the middle of that, they're taking time to say, it's 110 degrees in the sun. He doesn't have regulation, so being too warm would boil him. It's not just being cold, so he's like guessing on the fly. Let me expose his suit for about a minute, then wrap him back up again. Put him in the shade of the Gibson to help in regulation, even still. And Damien seems like he will be okay in this circumstance, but it's sort of interesting to have it be he's safe, but not really because it's still having to
Mm-hmm.
jank the solution out on the fly and hope it works because there's no way to know what's going
Yeah, it did seem like Hibito was using some very hopeful
on.
math there.
Yeah, I don't think the astronauts are run through calculus of if you have no temperature regulation and you're close to death, here's how a 180-pound human would meat would warm up in 110 degrees Celsius. So, but this one, the episode title is Hibito's Choice, and I
Yes.
like that. The first choice is you think about what to do and how to go about trying to save Damien, trying to save himself, whether or not uh, his choice is like I'm going to do me to save him in this case, which is against protocol. They keep flashing back those on EVAs, here is your triage procedure, and they're basically full on in violation of all of it. But Hibito don't care. You think it's a choice earlier, but in the end, his choice either came last chapter where he decided to move to try to bring Damien up to Gibson and caused his own doom in that case. But after that happened, which is into this episode, it's already happened. He doesn't really have a choice because there's nothing else to do. He can't swap suits with Damien and be like, well, yours has oxygen. Let me just steal that. Yoink. Uh, so, so they're already in a Schrodinger's doom state. But you think it's the choice there, and then of course it's conveyed later that the choice is basically, all right, now that I've put you in a condition where you'll be fine, we still can't talk to help. No one can communicate with us. I know that help is way more than 8 minutes away. So therefore, I'm just going to do a thing that's entirely against regulation and maybe just jump down there and enjoy the view of the stars as I expire. It's again a very somber thing when he tells Damien like something I've always wanted to try, a walk alone, and obviously Damien immediately is assuming, he knows he can do math as well as Hibito knows he doesn't have enough time. So
Mhm.
he knows basically Hibito is walking off to die. So his choice ultimately is.
So this is the episode, I believe, and I believe you were just leading into this, if I'm recalling correctly. So Hibito is walking alone, and he basically considers jumping into
Right.
the ravine before he sees the sparkle again
The gleam.
and decides to go investigate to satisfy his curiosity as his last
Mm-hmm.
act. He's satisfying his
Yes.
curiosity.
Well, it could be aliens, so you got to figure it out. They saw this gleam as they came on the moon. They talked about it earlier. It's where the Gibson signal disappeared, so he knows that thing is like, all right, fine. Now it does seem a little bit Deus ex machina that right as he's basically on the very edge. The anime definitely amps this up a bit more. In the manga, Hibito is walking to the edge and considering it, but he's not like literally footsteps over the chasm and rocks getting knocked down when
Mhm.
he sees the gleam. He's fairly close, but he's not quite that close before the gleam happens. But yes, in both, he quickly reconsiders and is like, you know what? I need to know what that is. And what is it?
And he finds Brian J. once again butting into his life.
What a jerk.
I know, what a bastard. But yes, Brian J. left behind the figure of the astronaut on the moon that has been gleaming in the distance, and like a beacon, Hibito finds it.
Now, that was the revelation is at the very end of Hibito's choice, so it doesn't leave you, thankfully, waiting a week to know if he's going to just hurl himself off a cliff or not, which they absolutely could have. It would have
Mm.
tortured me even worse than his oxygen pack exploding after he fell off a cliff. But he walks over to a thing, says, Brian, the very end reveal of the episode, I feel like was so eerie. He's like, Brian. And then you're staring out, you get sort of an odd musical and effect tone, and just this bright light from Hibito's suit shining on this tiny little suit, the Brian version of what we'd seen earlier in
Mm.
J, and then it goes to black. I think that was way creepier than it should have been to me. I mean, it ultimately doesn't lead, and you can, put together what's going on. But it was such an eerie shot to end on, and I think a lot of it just still has to do with, the understanding that he's still running out of oxygen, and he comes over here, and what the crap is this? But the reveal of the doll at the very end of the episode, and immediately going to the ending it was just creepy. It was creepy. It's weird. I don't know if you found it creepy.
I mean, I didn't find it creepy, but
But well, maybe
excuse me.
eerie is the better word to use than creepy. But so you get the next episode, which is titled Brian. Uh, I
Yes.
wonder who's going to take precedence here. This is the one where we get the longer scenes. Brian has been, with a quick thing with Hibito in training, where Hibito's having problems.
Mm.
He's talked about the EVA's procedure and triaging in case of dangerous situations. So you've gotten that, and we've gotten Brian in a lot of scenes previously. We know how formative he's been for a lot of people, but we get the very extended scene here. Hibito really having issues. Sorry, what is it? That before the OP in this episode, we have just the recap of Hibito going over and seeing the doll, and then a huge portion of it is right after the OP is them 6 years ago undergoing, mission training again, or however long it's been. I do enjoy. I mean, he seemed kind of like a bit of a jerk in the previous ones, but I think they pull off, especially because Hibito's like he was like a father, like a big brother, but the swagger in which he enters every scene and the hello Hibito, it is me, veteran Brian J.
Yeah, he's swinging around a lot of big dick energy.
This dude has biggest dick energy. Veteran Brian J has come here to see you. And of course, that will pay off shortly, but I think it made me immediately swing around to just straight up enjoying everything at that point. We rather knew how important he was to people. We got a little bit of a maybe he's a bit of a dick, and then this one is like, no, I just love this guy. So Hibito is undergoing training, and Brian is screwing with him basically. But notices why the training is going off. I enjoyed the revelation, that he reveals. He immediately notices what's off. They've changed procedures. He knows all of these procedures and starts going through them. Then he gets a phone call and is talking someone through a technical thing while showing Hibito all of the changes that was made, pointing around with his finger. It's the kind of thing where I'm like, oh, it's rolling Muda. And then immediately Hibito's like, hi, it's very much like, like how Muta would go. Like, Muta does the same thing, so you get an enjoyable connection there. I don't suppose Muta will have an opportunity to be veteran Muta to Hibito and point out procedure stuff, but I enjoy the brother connection. Although it's interesting to think because Brian is the younger brother, so it's an interesting parallel. Obviously, he and Eddie are just both extreme veterans of the program, and so he's way older brother or father figure to Hibito here. But it's interesting to simply think, Hibito is now in the younger brother position, being taught by the younger brother. So it's sort of flipping things around in a not terribly meaningful way, but an amusing to think about way. Also, when I was watching this again yesterday, I had to go get an apple and start eating an apple because Brian was eating an apple. He has that effect.
Yeah, I can understand that. That whole suggestive way he munches into that apple and then throws it to the dude to hold on to.
So yeah, we're 8 minutes in before we actually get back to real time. So it's all been that flashback scene. It takes, I think, longer than any other flashback scene so far. So that feels meaningful, certainly. Although in part it may simply be they have to balance the points and they needed to add more stuff. It's definitely in the manga. but you sort of
Hmm.
wonder. It obviously doesn't take as long to convey in the manga what is it, that 5 minutes of flashback is 4 pages of manga. So they extend and mess around a bit. I guess it mainly depends how much internal and conversational dialogue is going on with it. I enjoy that Hibito thinks it's a hallucination as well. Like, ooh.
But yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier. This was peak heart palpitation. Oh my goodness, are we actually gonna see this moment for me? And I'm really glad that they didn't hide the resolution behind the
Yes,
cliffhanger.
that would have been real bad. And
That would have been. Oh, I would have screamed bloody murder.
may not have survived either because stressed to unconsciousness or angry to unconsciousness. Now, I don't know if the manga had been at this point translated to this level, maybe scanlated. So that's the kind of thing. Do you think if they had ended and you didn't know his fate, it would have been the kind of thing that makes you go, I have to find out and make sure he's not dead? Let me go find the manga, or
I wasn't much of a manga reader at this point, so I no, I wouldn't have gone and checked.
even to know. But yeah, it's an interesting and contemplative rollout because of course Hibito is just looking at the tracks Brian left to place the toy on this rocky promontory. Not really, it's just a boulder, but it's overlooking a neat area, and is obviously where he wanted Eddie to set down his. But you get that level of reasonable permanence. The moon doesn't have full permanence, but obviously regolith takes a long time to cover up tracks, so you're seeing basically fresh tracks, proof of Brian's existence on the moon, and Hibito's, considering that while we're juxtaposed with NASA counting down how much time they're able to see, because they can get readings from Damien and Hibito's suits, so they have once they got above the crater, they got GPS conditions, but they also got the oxygen level readings, and I assume Damien's, well, his suit specs might be messed up a bit more with the temperature regulation, but they don't mention that anything about that. But it's mainly concerned with Hibito's oxygen level. And of course, we get a lot of time with them fretting over all of this. And, you get a little bit of semi. It's not comedic, it just feels so out of place because Buddy and Freddy are freaking out. Pedal to the metal, a thing that can move at, maybe 12 kilometers per hour or something like that. Actually, it'd be a bit more than that. They had to move 20 kilometers in 20 minutes. So it moves actually at a decent clip, I guess. But it would be hilarious if they went off the cliff. Not really. But everyone is in the middle of everything, and then it just pans out to Muta sitting in the room, Hoshiko.
Which is another thing that would have bugged me to no end, just sitting there in an entertainmentless room, wondering if someone is going to walk in at some point and tell me that my brother is
Yep.
dead.
Yeah, but he's just sort of, he Hibito, I won't worry about you. You always come back acting like nothing is wrong. Uh, but you get a bit of that time, and it's between, oxygen is counting down, oxygen is gone. I feel like, again, we're getting some liberties here because they talk about oxygen falling under 20%. I guess they have to keep 20%. It starts falling very quickly once the time is out. And oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, this is. I think this episode has two of the best uh, conveyance of human emotions. One of them is, Hibito going through all of this here, which is just extraordinarily panicked and stressful. And of course, then when he passes out and just falls down, and we go to effectively black, it certainly feels like there's no coming back from that at that point. And it does feel a little
Mm-hmm.
bit like
Yeah,
a cheat
absolutely. Like I said, this.
that he does get back up. But I'm glad he does.
Until Brian comes to save the day once
Ghost
again.
of Brian, and then it's revealed that it's Brian 03. Oh man, there's three of them. The oxygen bot. So we had a short scene.
I
Did you at the time notice the short scene that they sort of gloss over pretty quickly, but where Ozma talks with the Capcom chief? He doesn't say anything. He just
yeah, I know. Yeah, I noticed that scene. Yeah, I noticed that scene. I also I really enjoyed the climactic moment of this scene when Hibito is lying there on the ground, no oxygen, basically just moments away from dead, and Ozuma is the one who shouts at him and gets him to fight enough to get to the oxygen tank. That was a really good, really well done moment, in my opinion.
although we know that there's no communication, so it's Azuma is the audience stand-in, where we are just desperate for Hibito to move. So stand up, and I guess if yes, Hibito, use Brian for oxygen. I guess if we think Hibito can full on pass out and yet be woken up by movement in his barely cognizant vision and be hallucinating Brian approaching, we can assume that the mental energies of Azuma here and the entire audience is enough for him to keep fighting through the rest of it, even though he's got nothing else going on. He's he's still got a lot to go too, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
He's like walking very far over there. Uh, you almost feel like I feel like there are a couple things that make me wonder, and again, there are elements that make me think it should have been addressed. So, for instance, one of the things that comes to mind is the kind of breathing techniques where you try to slow down your heart rate, slow down your breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Has that ever been a part of astronaut training? How effective do we know that to be? Would that reasonably be something where it's like, well, I don't know about, I'm on tenuous oxygen levels, but, if I try to just meditate and slow my functions down, can I sit here in time for rescue to get to me? that sort of comes to me not just in shows like this, but other shows like with a sinking ship or another thing where people have pockets of air. It's like okay, they never seem to talk about it, and I would, it's not something that I would be able to do generally, and probably in panic situations most people wouldn't be able to get into a condition like that. But you do wonder whether or not that has enough function and whether that should be a part of training, which is just like, well, you got 8 minutes, but if you slow down things long enough, it can actually last you 20. I don't know. But
I would imagine that something like that is part of their survival training. I don't know how major it is, but it wouldn't surprise me to hear that something like that is part of their survival training.
we need a official word from NASA. So the first NASA person to listen to this podcast, please answer all of our dumb questions. Let us know. But the
But finally, Hibito is safe, and we get enter the epilogue of this
it
arc.
really did come for me. Yes, we end right there. The next episode, Three Astronauts, that has the what is it? Everyone is cheering. We get the revelation that Azuma talked and said, Brian 03, that one was one of the drones that Azuma thought to just send out there and send everything else. We don't know what might be needed. Send every resource we possibly can out there. They'll be able to get there. They did get a camera shot of the end, which helped. And at that point, Azuma said, "Let's follow, that worst case scenario, and at least send Brian 03 that way. We could get a camera on them. We don't know how useful it will be, but at the very least, we don't need to keep this one here. Once Freddy and Buddy are there, they have all of the resources. It would make more sense for it to be over there. So that's why we have an off-screen rescue element that's kept from the audience. I wish we saw less of NASA, and the reason is this wouldn't have been a secret for NASA. They would have known that that particular element was on the way. Osmo's let me take care of it, which is true. He was doing a special operation that everyone else wasn't involved in. That's perfectly fine. Maybe not everyone would know, but basically, especially once they were discovered, it would have been, what's the ETA for that thing getting there? They had GPS coordinates for everything. They wouldn't have been in full freak-out mode. They would have been talking literally about the other thing. So again, that's a definite drama cheat. And I understand, it's a very good drama that it's in service of, but that's why I feel like if we'd gotten a bit less of NASA, it would have made more sense to frame over at JAXA and have them concerned, have Hoshika saying, don't read a countdown, don't tell Muda about it. We don't want him to just have nothing to do but watch the clock on his brother's life expire. It would have been also fine, I think, for us to get the freak out moments from Damien and Freddy, because it's quite possible that they wouldn't have been in the middle. They wouldn't have been in a communication loop of something like that. You'd think they probably would, but you could make an excuse that, they didn't have communication the whole time, or they weren't paying as close attention because their concern was there, so they didn't need to be kept in the loop necessarily. but you do think that, if you're from the NASA frame of reference, they know that there's a probe going over there. They know that Bright 03 is heading there. They would have been talking about the ETA and whether or not it can be sped up anymore, whether or not it could be used to flash communication in a manner that Hibito could notice to be able to walk over to it. So they would have been on the other stage of the last remaining stage of rescue, but we needed the dramatic reveal, so NASA couldn't be doing that. They had to be acting wrong. But that's where, if they weren't a part of the audience revelation, to me it would be a bit more believable, and that we'd get the dramatic reveal from Hibito's frame of reference and the audience surprise. So
I will say that Buddy and Freddy were surprisingly polite with their language while heading out to rescue Hibito. The punk kid back on Earth swore more than Buddy or Freddy did in this life or death situation. It feels like, I know that this series, was never aiming for anything, but Buddy or Freddy could have let out like a curse word during
you
this
want an
situation.
F-bomb here somewhere?
Yeah, just one to emphasize. I get that they're professional, but still, this is a life or death situation. You'd think that someone could let loose one little curse word to emphasize the frustration. But then again, maybe that's just me and my limited vocabulary.
But this has the other one of where, like I said before, the ability to convey just raw human emotion. Because after Hoshiga comes in to tell Muda that Hibito is safe, you get a full minute of just dedicated watching Muta go through a stack of emotions at the end, just going through a certain sense of relief and elation, but leads into excuse me, but leads into basically he's so far on the edge that he's basically tearing up and trembling, and his emotional state is so wrought, which you understand. I think all of us are pretty much that at that point as well. It's only over 2 pages in the manga, but they give an entire minute of just letting him go through all of those stages in the anime, and I think that was tremendously well done. Which is a weird thing to be all-ons, but yes, that particular catharsis is what ended, the danger to me. We knew that the danger was already over, but that's the final processing of it was Muda in that room, saying nothing until the very end with just thank you very much.
This entire arc is really, it's probably one of my favorite anime story arcs ever. It's certainly the one that has stuck out the most to me over the last 20 something years that I've been watching anime. It's really rare for me to come across a story arc in anything really that hits me on such a visceral level when I'm watching it that I remember that feeling for years afterward. And this story arc did that to me.
That definitely makes sense. And it's part of the, I think, the unique appeal of Space Brothers to me. Obviously, I love everything about the show generally. I like that
Mm-hmm.
even your most emotional things have to do with, has succeeded in be, being accepted to the astronaut program, or survived a dangerous situation on the moon, uh, which is usually not where most anime is pulling their things out of. Uh, and as much as it's very slow paced generally, and sometimes you're just kind of going get on with it, go do something else. Not
Mm-hmm.
really as much for me, but I know that there were one or two times where that has affected you before now. But this right
Yeah, yeah.
here was 6 episodes representing uh we're not on Dragon Ball time. This would have been 5 minutes and 10 episodes if we're in DBZ time. But but it was still 6 episodes across basically 2 hours of action, and so it's a little bit shocking just how much drama and raw emotion they get to convey over that time, and you feel like you're moving at a crazy pace just because of the danger the situations are, even though it's still operating at a fairly slow normal pace for the series, where things are drawn out generally. uh, I guess it is a lot faster than normal because 12 chapters, 6 episodes would normally be reflecting many days of time, and skipping forward a few weeks or a few months to another situation to move the story forward. And this is one of the few times where we're getting a whole lot of episodes concentrated around one event. And of course, as we can see, that's
Yeah,
40
and
episodes into the series, where we're at a point that extends long past a lot of ones where they've already played their story out, or like the Urusei Yatsura redo, they gave it 4 cores, so we're right at the end point where they've done everything that they're going to do in the whole series, and it's like, ah, this is the first time that we've had a lengthy episode, heightened dramatic point rather than just rote storytelling. So it, it's a hell of a lead up, basically, especially because it comes right after, I think, what I still think is the emotional high of the series, from Kenji, Serika, and Muta being accepted and starting their journey. And then it's like, oh,
mhm.
by the way, you could go on an EVO on the moon and pitch yourself off a cliff. Oops. But so yeah, we continue on. This episode is called Three Astronauts. You don't get the full meaning of it until the very end. Most of this is just after
Yeah.
effects. You're shown a bit of a full explanation of what the dolls mean because Freddy knows, and a bit of still teasing Buddy about his desire to see aliens, even if he didn't think they'd be gray, and things like that. Excuse me. We get the flashback to where they came from, so we get to see our first Eddie and Brian as kids. So they're 13 and 11. Hibito and Muta have mostly been 13 and 10 in their flashbacks. So get the child parallel. I can't quite figure out if from that flashback it's like that's what made them want to become astronauts. Obviously, they've been very excited over it because, it's like, who would be that excited over a toy astronaut suit that's supposed to represent Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong? That, what they say, was like $90 in 1980 dollars, which is like $350 now. Those are expensive as crap.
Yeah, and plus it didn't. I hate to, judge or generalize, but it did not look like they came from an upper class family.
No. They were just out ice skating in, where are they, in New York City? Probably. I think that was Rockefeller Center. But, more spice! So yeah, they don't look like $350 toys either. I mean, there are a lot of scale figures you
really
can
don't.
buy for $350 that are way more intricate and interesting. But hey, they're excited and they're like, let's bring him to the moon because they're supposed to be space worthy. I guess that's where the premium value is. It's like, it isn't anything that's a plastic toy space worthy. Because what's going to go on with it? But
plus, you can call anything space worthy because how many people are going to go test it?
Exactly. Well, that's why they have to become astronauts so they can both go to the moon, so they can bring their toys there, so they can test whether or not after 40 years those things are actually space worthy. They could then, if they're not, they could sue the manufacturer, get their money back. So that was their plan all along.
That was their dastardly plan to get their money back just in case.
Karen gets to examine Damien, and his hands are crazy frostbite. I feel like they got to slice into it a little.
Swollen to all the hell,
all
and Buddy is
He's got to wear
shuddering.
oven mitts the whole time, and he passed out. Karen seems like she'll enjoy it. So I did the other astronaut lady. I don't remember her name. The blonde is watching Hibito sleep, and that made me wonder whether or not there is going to be a thing between the two of them. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Maybe there will be a development.
I didn't get that impression.
Well, I mean,
I never got that impression from that.
It's short. I mean, it's a short scene, but obviously, if he's just sleeping off to the side, now maybe it's simply that both of them have to be monitored, and so she's doing.
That was what I thought it was.
But he wasn't in the same location with Damien. If he was in Med Bay, sort of, you figure that he would have been there. In this case, he was just brought to a place where it could be dark and more like a restful environment. But she's watching over him, and she's sort of, just smiling, seeing that he's all right. So I got at least a little bit of a, okay, Hibito hasn't had anything, but Muta has commented about the two Bijin ladies that he's going on the 0G plane with and the other stuff. He's always jealous of the beautiful ladies as part of his crew. So I'm like, okay, maybe there'll be something. Hibito has gotten enough focus from here that it made me wonder whether or not he would get a bit more focus going forward, or if this was a short parlay into Hibito-dom, and then, of course, Muta's the audience proxy and the one who has to go through training, so we're just gonna flip back there. That's what everyone will find out. But at the very least, there was enough going on that it made me wonder if there would be a thing. you wonder if anything will happen between Muta and Serica. You wonder if Hibito will get any action. Right?
I don't know. Hibito strikes me as the kind of guy who could get action if he wanted to.
But there are more
But
important things.
he's too career driven to be distracted by
He's got
that.
space to do.
Muta, on the other hand, strikes me as someone who wants to but can't.
Yes. Indeed, he doesn't feel like a. I guess he hasn't really mentioned it, and it's certainly possible that he's had girlfriends previously. It's obviously like romance is obviously not a thing. The only thing we've had is that Sarek is very pretty, and Muta's been admiring her the whole time. We'll get a bit more of that in the next episode, but but that's as far as it goes. And he's got such an innocent, dorky take on it that you're like, yeah, I know your type. You keep buzzing out there.
Sorry, I have my phone on vibrate, and it's on my desk right now. Sorry
put it
about
on your
that.
desk. We're gonna hear it. I guess you're busy chatting with everyone, not even interested in the show anymore.
Anyways, but yeah, but yeah, that's the impression that I always got. But yeah, from that one short scene, I never got the impression that anything was going on between Hibito and the other lady astronaut, whose name I also don't remember.
But yeah, well, we'll see. We get a quick Nasuda scene again, who's, it's been a few days apparently, and Jax is finally allowed to chat with Hibito directly. So Nasuda, as Jaxa King, gets to do his thing first. But then we get a really nice Muta and Hibito scene. Of course, we get a bit of.
I did like that they brought it full circle and explained the episode title, and they had their brotherly conversation, which I just appreciated and really enjoyed.
The beginning of it is great. First of all, the Muta staring too closely into the camera and getting his prominent brows. Sometimes it does feel like Muta is actually just a mecha carrying his eyebrows around and his afro. But they start with, "Hey, how's it going?" Just sort of a downplay. Even if you know serious crap's going on, it feels like a very sibling thing to just dodge around or poke humorously at it. And Hibito's like, did I not tell him? But then, yeah, admits that there is danger and I was saved by 3 astronauts. But that's not even, that's the end of it. But the beginning of it is more concerned with saying, the view is great. You should come here and take a look. So that's a nice moment, because even in the middle of all of this, Hibito is still thinking about Muta going to space, going to the moon, and before anything else. And then they chat about the situation. 3 astronauts saved him. Brian, whose doll pulled him away from the edge. Azuma, who sent the Brian 03 over, and Muta, who told them where to go. And yes, it's all in service of this connectivity. But again, when you think about it, it's like there are only 2 places that would be a possibility. So you do feel like it's the kind of thing that NASA would have just covered on their own, even without it. Uh, Including where,
So I know we were gonna.
sorry, I just meant including the part where Ozma thinks to send all of the rovers over, when NASA is
Mhm.
talking about all of the engineering stuff at the very beginning and all of the possible situations. What if this is damaged? I feel like that would have also been one of the things that just occurred to the engineers is, well, send every resource that can reach that location out so we have everything available to us. But we need the good tie-in. So let's give it to Muta and Azuma.
Well, I mean, I know we were gonna talk about episode 45. Do we want to save it for next time since we've been going for 2 hours
Okay. I
now?
wasn't keeping track of time. My cup has been covering that. Yeah, I don't know. Hold on a second. Let me check. The schedule I had originally for us to go to 45. The next one is 46 through 55, which sounds like a lot, but there are 3 episodes that are recap, 52, 53, and
Which,
54.
yeah, we don't need to. We don't need to recap the
And
recaps.
so that's fine. I thought it would give us a bit of a spacer, but we've run into what is kind of what we're trying to keep to max length per episode. So we'll we'll figure out
Yeah,
the
I
right
think we can
pace
save
for the
it for the
next
next
one.
time.
I think we can go through the AskHan training a bit faster. I don't remember the ending manga chapter. I didn't look that up, so I apologize about that.
How
How
dare
dare me,
you?
indeed. But before we break, we do have to now talk about the opening. So
Yes, this is my favorite opening. I love this opening. The animation may not be my favorite. It's very good. I like it, but this in terms of music, this is my favorite OP.
that's interesting. I certainly like the music. I certainly, but I like a lot of the music in the openings.
I like Feel So Moon a lot too. Don't get me wrong. But like in terms of just general coziness, this is a good theme.
Now, I mean, a lot of what I pull out of this is the funness of
Mm-hmm.
the situation. Are you familiar with the multiple sources they're drawing from for the imagery in it?
Some of them. Some of them.
So what are we what is the setup here then?
I only got the obvious references of like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and such.
Well, that's Jules Verne, but this one is, of course, From the Earth to the Moon, because that's the book at the end.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the other part of it is, have you ever watched? Maybe we should pause so you could watch it. Have you ever watched the Georges Méliès short film of this, From the Earth to the Moon? Uh,
No, I haven't.
I'm trying to remember. This is during the very beginnings of film. So in 1902, that's the one that he's most well known for. Trip to the Moon. Uh, you should watch it. I think that would let you appreciate this even more. But what the
Okay.
opening is doing is it's basically giving you an OP version of literally that. And what I mean by that is, in that short film, a bunch of people, they don't look like astronauts, but they're a bunch of weirdos pile into a rocket, essentially a cannon fired rocket, and they get shot to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they get, excuse me, uh, it's a very famous picture of the a face in the moon and then a rocket like splatters on the side of it. You may have seen that in a meme thing, but you get God, I'm trying to think how long it is. It's not terribly long. I think if it's running at 24 frames a second, so like full speed, because all of these had different running times depending on how how you were running the films of that day, but it'd be like 9 or 10 minutes long. So they wander around the moon, they see aliens, and they all, you know, run around. So basically, Hibito is doing the wandering around the moon, and then Appo was the face in the moon, and so all of this is just like a short play, all done in homage to the Méliès short, A Trip to the Moon, and of course the style of it and the inspiration for it was from the Jules Verne story. I only have one disappointment in it. I enjoy that we have that we have some kind of bare-chested Kenji and Nita holding up a star, dressed in togas, and Saraka sitting on the moon like a swing, which is a fairly common thing from that kind of day in vaudevillian. You get
Yeah.
Nasuda and Surumi. I wanted Hoshika in here. That's my only disappointment. When they panned over everyone, we don't get Best Girl Hoshika, and that makes me sad. But yes, no.
How
How
dare
dare they
they?
indeed?
Such bastard.
But yeah, I love that opening. It's one of those things where what is it? It's very hard for a lot of things to beat the first opening, because if I really love the series, that's been the formative thing. That's what introduced me to the series. As long as it's good, it will have been drilled into my head quite a bit more. It's basically what it turns into. So I definitely still feel so Moon. I get pumped up, excited most about that one.
Yeah, Feel So Moon is definitely right up there. I do love that one very much, but yeah, this one, number 4, is my favorite.
I think, by the way, I was taking a quick look at up to episode 55. Sorry, give me 1 second again. Because it goes to Promise to Drink. Does Vince go with?
Did I miscount?
No. I'm trying to figure out the manga chapter just to let that be the
Oh,
parting shot.
got it.
It feels like it's at around 107, 108, but I may be mistaking which time we see. Did they do their little rover? Yeah, okay. They're in the middle. They're in the middle of the rover, so it's the first scene where Vince meets up with Pico. We find out there's a connection between Pico and Vince. So
Got it.
102 is where it ends. So if you're reading the manga up through episode 55, that'll end on 102. So, all right.
So, all right, let's go ahead. Let's call it there. Thank you for another fun discussion.
Of course, you can't get me to shut up about Space Brothers.
We might be back next Sunday. There's nothing currently on my schedule for that day, but pay attention to the social media channels, and they will let you know when exactly we're going to go live again. But until then, have a good night. Thank you for joining us, and later.
Night, everybody.